Okay, so today we're going to look at factoring trinomials. Okay, section 6.2 and 6.3. This is going to be from Unit 10. Okay, this is from Unit 10. When we're looking at factoring trinomials, essentially what we're looking at is going backwards from foiling. Okay, so factoring is the opposite of foiling. Okay, so when you're talking about doing foiling, what you're looking at here is x times x, which would be x squared, x times negative 3, okay, so this is the first. Outside, x times negative 3 is negative 3x. Inside, so 4 times x is positive 4x. And last, that's inside, and last would be positive 4 times negative 3, which is negative 12. Okay, so first, outside, inside, last. Now from there, we would take this, and we have two common factors here in the middle, not common factors, we have two like terms in the middle, negative 3x and a positive 4x, which we would then combine to give us x squared plus 1x minus 12. Okay, so if we were going to FOIL, that's what we would be looking at. Okay, so that's a matter of multiplying it out. Now, when we're factoring, we're trying to undo that FOIL process. So we're trying to take a trinomial that looks like this. Okay, we're going to want to split it so that we end up with a polynomial with 4 terms. And then we're going to do something called factor by grouping, which we had done in section 6.1. We're going to factor by grouping to get us back to this point. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to undo the FOIL process. Okay, so as a quick little reminder, in section 6.1 we looked at the factor by grouping. So factor by grouping happens when you have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 terms. So you're going to take this thing and you're going to group it. So we're going to look at those front 2 terms, the 2x squared plus 4x, and then we will look at the last 2 terms, the negative 3ax minus 6a. We're going to look at those separately. So looking at this first 2 set of terms, 2x squared plus 4x, I pull out my GCF, which was my greatest common factor. Okay, so the greatest common factor between those two, I have a 2 that is common to both of them, and I also have an x that is common to both of them. There's an x in both of them. Remember, you have to pull out whatever the smallest exponent is. That's the largest that we can take out, okay, and that's the greatest. So we've got 2x squared plus 4x, so we take the 2x out. Okay, remember this is a dividing process, so essentially I'm dividing each of these by 2x. So when I divide that out, I would end up with an x left here. Okay, the 2 comes out. I had 2 x's to start with. I only took 1 out, so I have 1 x left. Okay, 4x divided by 2x, the x's cancel. 4 divided by 2 is positive 2. Okay, so that's just that front piece. Now we've got to take a look at this second piece here. I've got negative 3ax minus 6a. So between them, my common factor is going to be a negative 3a. A negative 3a. I take a negative out because these are both negative, but I want my numbers to be positive in my parentheses. Okay, remember our goal is to try to get something to match this. So since this is both positive, I need these to both be positive. So I'm going to take that negative out front, so that way when I divide it out, divide this by negative 3a, this by negative 3a. Okay, dividing both of those by negative 3a, here, negative over negative makes a positive, and I've got a positive x. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is a positive 2. My a's there cancel. Okay, now once I get to this step right here, I have my nice little matching terms. Remember, they must match exactly, including the signs and everything. Okay, so x plus 2, we're good. That means I can factor those terms out. So I get an x plus 2 out front, and I have a 2x minus 3a. Okay, that's these pieces right here. That's what I have left. When I factor an x plus 2 out, I'm left with 2x there and negative 3a there. So that would be my factoring by grouping. That would be my final answer, x plus 2, 2x minus 3a. Okay? So now, if I want to factor a trinomial, okay, so now we're looking at factoring a trinomial. We're going to use this skill, which is why we just went back over it, but we will use that skill in just a second. Okay, so steps for factoring. When I say factoring, I'm talking about trinomials here. Okay, so when they're in this form, x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, the first thing you need to do is determine what we call the target product. Target product. Okay, target product, which you'll hear me say a lot during class. Okay, determine the target product. The target product, okay, you find by multiplying the coefficients a and c. A and c. So when it's written in this form right here, x squared plus bx plus c, the number in front of x squared is always your a, and the number by itself, called our constant, is always your c. So if I multiply those two numbers together, what we get is what we call our target product. Now, once I have the target product, I can find the target sum. Okay, the target sum. This is just the coefficient b. So going back to this, which is our standard form here, ax squared plus bx plus c, b is always the number sitting in front of the x, just the x, not the x squared. Okay, so that's what we call our target sum. Now between those, we have to determine which factors of the target product will add to get the target sum. So we're trying to find two numbers to multiply to our target product, but add to our target sum. And I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Okay, once we can find those two numbers, we're going to do a process called split the middle. Okay, there are multiple ways of factoring. A lot of people have learned how to factor using guess and check, where you just kind of plug numbers in and you try to figure out which ones would be the opposite of the foiling. Okay, I'm going to show you a process called split the middle. The great thing about split the middle is that if it factors, split the middle will work. Okay, so split the middle is going to be a great use. It's going to be a great tool. It works no matter what our coefficient in front of x squared is. Okay, which later on when you move to the next unit, we'll find some different shortcuts. But for now, we're going to look at just split the middle. Step 5, once I split that middle, okay, which is going to be this step essentially, I'm going to take this middle term, I'm going to split it back out, okay, so that I have two new middle terms, and then I'm going to factor by grouping. Okay, factor by grouping, which is this process right here. So that's our step-by-step. You can always refer back to these steps. Okay, if you find yourself getting stuck or saying, I don't know where to start, this tells you. Start with the target product. Start with the target sum. Now, it is important, though, here first, always take the GCF out first. Okay, always take your greatest common factor out first. This is just going to make your life easier, because if you can take common factors out, then there's smaller numbers, smaller variables, things like that. So always take your GCFs out first. Saves you from having to go back and try to do it all at the end, working with larger numbers than you really need to. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples now, starting with factor the following trinomials. Okay, it even reminds you here, remember to pull your GCFs out first, so you want to look for that. Do I have a greatest common factor between all three terms? Okay, in this particular case, I don't. I only have an x in the first two terms, not in the last one, so we can't take out an x. Okay, I don't have a common number in any of them, so we have no GCF, so we're going to move on from there. Okay, now our step 1 says determine the target product. Okay, our target product. So the target product is found by multiplying a and c. Okay, please remember that when there is no number listed in front of x squared, if it has no number out there, we always call that coefficient 1. Okay, there's always at least a 1 out there. So when I do my target product, it is 1 times 3, which is just 3. Okay, my target sum is always going to be that b term, which is next to x. So here our target sum is 4. So now what I'm looking for, okay, we've got step 1 and step 2. We found our target product, we found our target sum. Okay, step 3 says determine which factors are going to multiply to 3 but add to 4. So I need two numbers that multiply to 3 but add to 4. The best way to go about this is to just start listing possible numbers that multiply to 3. So for instance, 1 times 3 obviously multiplies to 3. That happens to be the only one. Okay, there are no other two numbers that multiply to 3. 1 plus 3 happens to add to 4, so that makes it quite nice. Okay, so 1 and 3 are going to be the numbers we use. Okay, 1 and 3. So these become my split the middle terms. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, here we go. When we look at this, okay, our first number is going to drop straight down, x squared. Okay, that's this term right here. Our middle term, we're going to split, hence the word split the middle. So instead of doing 4x, I'm now going to use these two numbers. So I'm going to do 1x, I use the x because this was x, and plus 3x. Okay, 1 and 3, and I use whatever variable that middle term has. This was an x, so both of these are x's. And then plus 3. The last term comes down. That's what we call split the middle. If you look, those two middle terms should always add back to whatever my original middle term was. 1x and 3x does make 4x. Okay, if you get something different, then something happened. We made a mistake when we chose our numbers. You need to go back and try again. Okay, so from here, now I have a polynomial with 4 terms. Okay, and we did this in section 6.1, so this is factor by grouping. So at this point, group it up. Okay, group it up. So looking at just this left-hand side first, my GCF, I've got x squared plus 1x. Okay, I have an x in both, so that's my GCF. When I take that x out, I'm left with an x inside and plus 1. Okay, please keep in mind again that if you take the whole thing out, you have to leave at least a 1 in its place so that when I multiply it back in, I get x squared plus 1x. So same thing here. Okay, I have a GCF, I have a common factor of 3 that comes out front. Inside, when I divide each of these by 3, I get x plus 1. X plus 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. If I take that whole factor out, have to use a 1 to keep its spot. Okay, these two things right here should match up. If they don't, I have made a mathematical mistake and I need to go back. I need to double check both my math when I pull my GCFs out, and I need to double check my numbers. Make sure my two numbers multiply to my target product and add to my target sum. Okay, that's typically where the mistake is made, is either with those two numbers or when pulling that GCF out, because these two parentheses should be the same. Mine are, so I can move on. I factor out my x plus 1. I'm left with x plus 3. Okay, that would be my final answer. That's how I factor trinomials. X plus 1 and x plus 3. Okay, there is a shortcut to this, and that is if my coefficient of x squared is 1, then whatever my target product target sum numbers are, 1 and 3, that will be what goes in my parentheses with my x that splits. Okay, that is a shortcut. You are welcome to use that shortcut, although that does not work all the time. If you don't feel comfortable with shortcuts, I suggest you just learn to do the split the middle and go from there, because split the middle will work on everything that factors. Okay, so moving on to B. Okay, B is a little bit different. Now all of a sudden I do have a number out front. Okay, but if you notice, I have a 2x squared, negative 16x, and a positive 30. All of those have a common factor of 2. So I'm going to take that 2 out. That 2 that comes out must go out front. Please don't forget to write that 2 out front. It is still part of our problem. We are just factoring it out. Okay, so 2, I'm going to use my brackets here just to keep that 2 separate. X squared minus 8x plus 15. That's just dividing each of those terms by 2. Again, notice that that 2 is written out front. Sorry, my screen blanked. Okay, so now, instead of using these big numbers as a target product of 60 and a target sum of negative 16, I get to use these nice little numbers. Okay, so when I do my target product, target sum, I'm only looking at the piece inside. So my target product is 1 times 15, which is 15. Let me write that out for you. 1 times 15, which is 15. And my target sum is a negative 8. Oh, helps if you can see that. Okay, target product is positive 15. My target sum is this middle term, which is negative 8. So again, I have to figure out what two numbers multiply to positive 15, but add to a negative 8. Okay, now here's a little hint for you. It kind of helps. If my target product is positive, okay, both numbers have to be the same. Okay, which means they're either both positive numbers or they're both negative numbers. Okay, they can both be negative. A negative times a negative does make a positive, so they can both be negative numbers. So that's my target product is positive. They are both the same. If my target product is negative, okay, they have opposite signs. They're going to have opposite signs. That's the only way to get signs. That's the only way to get a negative product, is if one is positive, one is negative. Okay, so if my target product is negative, then they're going to have opposite signs. So that'll kind of help you when you play with your numbers. Okay, so back to this. I have to find two numbers to multiply to 15, but add to negative 8. So start by just listing out numbers that multiply to 15. Okay, there's not a whole lot. I've got 1 times 15 is one of them. I've got 5 times 3 is the other. Okay, 3 times 5, but that's not going to make a difference. It's just 1 and 15, 5 and 3. So I have to figure out is how can I put those numbers together to give me a negative 8. 1 and 15, if they're both positive, 1 plus 15, would give me 16. Negative 1 minus 15 would give me negative 16. Okay, so 1 and 15 is not going to work. If I do 5 and 3, 5 plus 3 is positive 8. I don't want positive 8. I want negative 8. Negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. Okay, so I found my numbers right there, negative 5 and negative 3. This is my split the middle. Here we go. So I've got 2 out front, bracketed, x squared minus 3x minus 5x plus 15. Okay, outside terms came straight down, inside term split the middle. Notice that when I add them back, negative 3x and negative 5x does make a negative 8x. Okay, so factor by grouping, here we go. Group it up. I get 2 GCF on this first set here between x squared and negative 3x is an x. I'm left with an x. If you need to, write it out. Divide it by x. I would get an x left here and a negative 3 left there. Okay, on this next section, be very careful with your signs. Here I've got a negative positive, but I want a positive negative. So when I factor my 5, I need to take a negative 5. Okay, by taking a negative 5, when I divide each one of these, negative 5x over negative 5 is positive x. And 15 over negative 5 is negative 3. Okay, these two things should match. Mine do, which means we did our math correctly. Yay us. Okay, so the 2 still out front. We factor the x minus 3 out. I'm left with x minus 5. Final answer. Final answer. Okay, when you get to this step, you would check and make sure that I don't have any GCFs left inside each of my set of parentheses. If I did my initial step correctly, then there won't be. I did take my GCF out in the very first step, so I don't have any at the end, which is good. Okay, if I didn't take it out in the beginning, say I forgot, then I would probably have some show up inside here, and I would have to factor out the GCFs then. C. Okay, here's another one. A squared plus 2a plus 10. Okay, same thing. Here we go. It's a trinomial. 3 terms should automatically scream to me target product, target sum. Target product is 1 times 10, which is just 10. Target sum is 2. So I'm looking for what two numbers multiply to 10 but add to 2. Here we go. Start listing them out. 1 times 10, 2 times 5. That's it. Okay? They're both positive, which means they have to have the same sign. 1 plus 10 is positive 11. Negative 1 minus 10 would give me negative 11. Okay, so 1 and 10 doesn't work. Try the 2 and 5. 2 plus 5 would give me 7. Negative 2 minus 5 would give me a negative 7. 2 and 5 doesn't work. So when neither one of their sets works, when I cannot find two numbers to multiply to my target product, but add to my target sum, then we call these prime. Okay, for right now we call those prime. When we get to the next unit, we'll actually take a look at what we do with those. But for now, we just call those prime and we get to move on, which is kind of nice. D. Okay, they're going to try to trip you up. They're going to throw in all kinds of extra variables. X squared plus 5xy plus 6y squared. Now they've thrown in that y, but our process is still exactly the same. Okay, when we do target product, target sum, we don't even care about the variables. All we care about are the coefficients. That's the number out front. Same thing here. Target product, target sum. Okay, my target product is 1 times 6, so target product of 6. Target sum is positive 5. So I'm trying to find what two numbers multiply to 6 but add to 5. Okay, start listing them out. I have 1 times 6, and I have 2 times 3. That's the only numbers. Hopefully it's kind of starting to jump out at you. As you get more comfortable with this, it becomes easier and easier to find each one of these products, the numbers. Okay, 1 plus 6 is 7. Negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. That doesn't work. 2 plus 3 does equal 5, however. So 2 and 3 is our numbers, are our numbers. Okay, so 2 plus 3 is going to add up to 5 and multiply to 6. So here we go. These are my new split the middle numbers, 2 and 3. Okay, 2 and 3. So here we go. First one drops down, x squared. Middle term splits, plus 2. Now instead of just an x, I have to use the x and the y. Okay, the middle term was xy. This has to be xy. Same thing with the next one, so plus 3xy. 2xy plus 3xy adds back to 5xy. Okay, that last term still comes down, plus 6y squared. Okay, x squared plus 2xy plus 3xy plus 6y squared. From there, do a little factor by grouping. Here we go. GCF here. I have an x in both. Okay, when I divide an x out, I'm left with x here. Here I would get 2y. Okay, same thing here. When I look at this, I have a positive 3y that comes out, right? I've got a y in both terms. Can't take out an x. I've only got one of those, so I've got a y in both terms, and I've got a 3 in both terms. 3y out front. When I divide this thing by 3y, 3's cancel, y's cancel. I'm left with x plus 2y. Okay, x plus 2y. Amazingly, look what happens. I end up with 2 common factors. X plus 2y, x plus 2y. That's how I know I'm doing it right. If these two things are different, then I need to go back and try again. Okay, here we go. Pull that out front, x plus 2y. Inside, I'm left with x plus 3y. X plus 2y comes out front, x plus 3y left inside. Before we move on from this, I do want to point out I couldn't take an x out of this beginning. A lot of people want to, but there is no x in this last term. This is a 6y squared. There's no x here, so if there isn't an x in all three, then I can't do it. Okay, once I factor by grouping, I'm allowed to take that x out because we're only looking at half of it at a time. So we're only looking at the x squared plus 2xy, and then we are only looking at the 3xy plus 6y squared. Okay, that's the point of the factor by grouping. As we split it, we only look at half of it at a time. Okay, so please keep that in mind as you go through these. That would be our final answer, x plus 2y times x plus 3y. Now there's quite a few more of these because there's a lot of different things that you can see. We did quite a few of them in class just so that you had a very good basis of what was happening. I'm going to finish these off for you. I'm going to keep talking because that's just what I do. Okay, so starting with the next one. Again, trinomial. Immediately says target product, target sum. Okay, that's going to be this unit, next unit, and all units. Trinomial, 3 terms, means target product, target sum. Okay, so my target product here, the front number times the last number. Don't forget to multiply. 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, target sum is just the middle number. So I've got a target sum of 11, and I've got a target product of 18. So I'm looking for what two numbers multiply to 18, but add to positive 11. So start listing them out. 1 times 18, 3 times 6, because that's what we use there. I know 3 times 6 works. 9 times 2 would work. I believe that's all. Okay, 9 times 2, 3 times 6, and 1 times 18. Now, which of those would add up to 11? The 9 plus 2. Okay, you could go through and check each and every one of them, but if you see it, jump at it. Okay, 9 and 2 would add up to 11 and multiply to 18. So that's my 2 new middle terms. Here we go. So this outside, 3x squared, split the middle, positive 9x, positive 2x, positive 6. Now, if you're wondering, it doesn't actually matter which order you put these in. 2x could come first, 9x could come first. Group them any way you want, okay? You want to try to make it as easy on yourself as possible. I saw the 3 and the 9, so I figured those two would make a pretty good group when I start talking about GCFs. Okay, so that's kind of how I chose, but make it easy on yourself, but it doesn't actually matter. You're going to get the same answer either way. Okay, you will get the same answer whether you put the 2 first or the 9 first. You will have a couple different, your steps will look different, but your answer will be the same. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you put 2 first, your steps will look different, but your answer will be the same. Okay, so here we go. GCF, 3x comes out. I'm left with an x plus 3 inside. Okay, again, if you have to physically write it out, go for it. You can write this out every single time. That's my GCF. That's what I'm dividing by. Okay, so I'm left with x plus 3. Same thing here. Divide that 2 out. So I got a positive 2 out front. You have to write that positive 2 out front. That's my GCF. And then I'm left with x plus 3. Okay, left with x here. 6 divided by 2 is 3. That's where those numbers come from. These things match up, so the x plus 3 comes out front. Left with 3x plus 2. X plus 3 factors out. Left with the 3x plus 2. Same process over and over again. Okay, be careful. Make sure you're checking for your GCFs. For instance, here we would check for a GCF. There isn't one. Okay, this one doesn't have an x. 13 is a prime number, so we don't have any GCF, so we're just going to move on. Target product, target sum. Okay, target product here is negative 14. Target sum is positive 13. Now this one tends to trip people up, but still, go through looking at your different options for your target product. Okay, I've got 1 and 14. I've got 2 and 7. Those are my only two options. Now you have to keep in mind that this is negative, which means my two signs have to be opposites. Hold on, my screen blanks again. I think it's trying to tell me I talk too much. Alright, so you have to use opposite signs. 1, 14 and 2, 7. Okay? So I'm trying to get to a positive 13. So my options here are positive 1, negative 14. Okay, which would equal negative 13. Or negative 1, positive 14. Which, what do you know, gives me a positive 13. Okay, so negative 1, positive 14. The sign here does matter. Okay, when I add them together, I need a positive 13, not a negative 13. So be very careful with your signs. Okay, once you have your numbers, do your split the middle. So we're going to get 2x squared minus x plus 14x minus 7. Okay, those outside, let me move that arrow. The outside terms there, okay, 2x squared and the negative 7, they just drop straight down. I split the middle term to give me negative x and positive 14x. Notice that when I add those together, I would get positive 13x. So I haven't changed the value, just changed the way it looks. It's the whole point of algebra, not changing values, changing the way things look. So here we go, factor by grouping. Okay, I have an x in both. The only thing they actually share in common is that x in both. So the x comes out front. Okay, when I divide that out, I would be left with a 2 and an x in the first set. X divided by x is 1, so I have a 1 left there. Okay, second set there, I've got a GCF of 7. So I get that positive 7 out front. I know it's positive because this already matches. Positive, negative, positive, negative. Okay, so I get a positive 7 out front. And when I divide out a 7, I end up with, what do you know? 2x minus 1. Okay, 14 over 7 is 2. I've got that x there. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 2x minus 1. What do you know? These two things are identical as they should be. That comes out front, 2x minus 1, left with x plus 7. Factored. Okay? Again, double check it for GCFs. There weren't any in the beginning. There probably shouldn't be any in the end. There isn't going to be any in the end. But you just want to double check just in case you missed something. Okay? Moving into some little bit bigger numbers. Okay, a little bit bigger numbers, but still same concept. Same concept. Look for the GCF. Again, I got that prime number there, so I have no GCF. So we're going to target product, target sum. Over and over again. Again, every time you see that trinomial, those three terms, you should immediately be screaming target product, target sum. Okay? Target product, target sum. Target product, 10 times negative 3, which is negative 30. Okay, 10 times negative 3, which is negative 30. I don't want to write that there. It's going to get in my way. Negative 30. Okay, target sum is that negative 13. So I'm trying to find what two numbers multiply to a negative 30 to add to a negative 13. So start listing things out. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 6 times 5. Okay, 6 times 5, I believe that's it. So now within those, 1 and 30 I think is kind of obvious. It's not that one. That's not going to give me a negative 13. Okay, 6 and 5, it's going to not give me negative 13. It kind of looks like it's between these two. So you just have to be careful with your signs. Okay, this is negative 30, which means opposite signs. Okay, negative product means opposite signs. So one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. So 2, negative 15, which what do you know happens to be negative 13. For those of you wondering, can there be more than one option? It's not going to happen. 3 and 10, Okay? If you talk about opposite signs, 3 and negative 10 is going to give me a negative 7. Negative 3 and positive 10 is going to give me a positive 7. So although 3 and 10 immediately jumps out and says 13, it doesn't actually work because of the sign. So you have to be very careful with those. Okay, take the time, write it out, make sure these things actually add up to that target sum. 2 minus 15 does give me negative 13. Go from there. Here we go. 10x squared. Okay, minus 15xy. Please don't forget that xy, otherwise you're going to lose a y in this process. Okay, negative 15xy, positive 2xy, negative 3y squared. Okay, split that middle term. Split that middle term over and over again. Okay, split that middle term. Factor by grouping. Here, my GCF is a 5x. Take that out. Left with 2x minus 3y. Notice that this kind of looks like it already. 2xy minus 3y squared. The only thing I'm missing is that I've got an extra y in there. So we're going to take that out. 2x minus 3y. What do you know? Those two things match up perfect. 2x minus 3y times 5x plus y. 5x plus y. Okay? One more to work here. Now here's a perfect example of pulling your GCF out first. First of all, those are huge numbers. Nobody wants to multiply 24 times 6 and try to find that target product. Okay? You definitely don't want to try to work with x to the 4th, x cubed, and x squared. So instead, what I do want to do is I want to take that GCF out first. Okay, the GCF, I know I can take between 24, 40, and 6, I can take a 2 out of there. I also have an x in all three, and the smallest exponent on the x's is the 2. So x squared is going to be what I can take out, because I've got 4, 3, 2. 2 is the smallest, that's what I can take out. So let's go ahead and divide that out of each and every one. So I get 12x squared plus 20x plus 3. When you get to this step, double check, make sure there isn't a number that goes into all three of these. Okay, because it is possible sometimes that you take out just a factor and not the greatest common factor. So double check, 3 doesn't go into 20, so we're good, we're ready to move on. Now let's target product, target sum. Target product, 12 times 3 is 36. Target sum is positive 20. Okay, we're just working with this piece inside. We've got to factor this stuff. Target product is 36, target sum is 20. So I'm looking for what two numbers multiply to 36, but add to 20. So start writing them out. I know 12 times 3, because that's how I got 36 to start with. Okay, go from there. So 6 times 6 is 36. I've got 2 times 18. Okay, 2 times 18. If you're wondering how I'm figuring these out, I'm kind of dividing these out. 12 divided by 2 is 6, so I divide this by 2 and I multiply this by 2. Okay, I can't divide that by 2 anymore. Well, I could. I can keep going down, but 2 would give me 3 and 12. I don't want to do that, so I divided by 3 and multiplied that by 3. So if I divide one and multiply it to the other one, that's a good way to kind of go about doing these. You can also use your calculator, things like that. Okay, just kind of keep dividing them out until you can figure out what two numbers multiply to 36 but add to 20. Okay, 2 plus 18 does add to 20, so 2 and 18 are the lucky numbers. Okay, the 2x squared, it's going to stay out front. I'm going to use my brackets just so I don't accidentally multiply it in. I've got 12x squared plus 18x plus 2x plus 3. Okay, that was my split the middle, the 18 and 2. Again, I could have done 2 and 18. It doesn't actually matter which way I choose to put them in. 2x squared stays out front. GCF, factor by grouping. Here, my GCF is 6x. I'm left with 2x plus 3. Notice this is already 2x plus 3. We've kind of already talked about it, but just as a review, if I don't have a common factor, I use 1. And that's really just to make my formatting match up. Okay, if I pull that 1 out front, and I parentheses the 2x plus 3, obviously 1 times 2x plus 3 is still the 2x plus 3. Haven't changed the value, just changed the way it looks. Point of math, right? So, I've got 2x plus 3, those things match up just perfectly as they should. 2x squared, 2x plus 3, and 6x plus 1. That would be your final answer. 2x squared, 2x plus 3, 6x plus 1. Okay, so moving on, you have 4 remaining. These were the your terms that we did in class, but just for the sake of making sure you have as many examples as possible, I'll go ahead and run through them. Target product is -12. Target sum is +4. Two numbers that multiply to -12 but add to a +4 would be 6 and -2. 6 times -2 is -12. 6 minus 2 is +4. So 6 and -2, those are my middle terms. I will split the middle with those. X squared plus 6x plus, or minus rather, almost made a mistake there, minus 2x minus 12. Outside terms drop down, middle terms split. Okay, factor by grouping. Take my x out, left with x plus 6. Take my +2 out, left with x. Not a +2. This was a minus 2x before I accidentally crossed it with my factor by grouping. Okay, this is negative, negative. I need positive, positive. So take a -2 out. And that leaves me with x plus 6. Okay, and that's just a perfect example. Whenever I'm working through it, all of a sudden I thought I saw an x minus 6, which triggered something that said that's not right. So then you can go back and look, and I had accidentally crossed my negative sign there with a nice little dotted line. So once I have that fixed, I can see I've got a negative in both that can come out, and we can move on from there. So now I'm matching. Here we go, x plus 6, x minus 2, final answer. Okay, next one, GCF out first, makes your life so much easier. I've got a 3 in all of these. Left with x squared plus 3xy minus 4y squared. Okay, so when I do that, target product is -4, target sum is +3. Two numbers that multiply to -4 but add to 3 would be +4 and -1. Okay, so that's my two numbers that I'm going to work with. Here we go, 3x squared plus 4xy minus xy, or 1xy, you don't have to write the 1, minus 4y squared. Factor by grouping. See, I almost did it again. Be careful with those negative signs. I'm going to skim right over to the left of it so that I don't accidentally change it this time. Okay, so that 3 out front. GCF here is an x in both, so that comes out front, x plus 4y. Here I've got a negative y in both, so the negative y out front leaves me with a positive x, positive 4y. Okay, I'm not doing the dividing. I am dividing, but I'm not writing it out. But you can still continue to write out the GCF out underneath if you need to do that, so that it kind of helps you to break it down. Okay, but that's technically what's happening, is I'm still dividing these things out. GCF out front, we no longer need the brackets, so I'm going to drop them on this last step. X plus 4y left with x minus y. This skill is going to come in super handy during the next unit, because we're going to turn around and do factoring, solving by factoring when we hit Unit 11. So this is a very, very, very handy skill. In fact, factoring is a very big part of all algebra and all math. It shows up in physics as well, so it's a very handy skill to have. That's why we kind of do it over and over again, trying to make sure that we have this skill down packed. So, let's do this last one. Target product. Make sure you multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. Target sum, that middle term is positive 7. Okay, hopefully this part's getting really comfortable and easy for you. Now, two numbers that multiply to 10 but add to 7. 5 times 2, 5 plus 2. Okay, again, you can list out all of your options if you don't see it right away. Split the middle. 5x squared plus 5x plus 2x plus 2. Okay, when I factor by grouping, here I've got a 5 and an x in both, so I will take that out. If you need to, write it underneath. I'm left with x plus 1. Remember, when I take that whole term out, I have to have a 1 in its place. I know I've said that a few times, but it's so important and it's so easily missed. Okay, that's something that people tend to accidentally leave off over and over again. It happens, but please be careful with them because it makes a very big difference in your answer. So here we get x plus 1. I've got an x plus 1 in both. That comes out front. X plus 1, left with 5x plus 2. Final answer. Done there. We've got 1 left and this lesson is over. GCF needs to come out first. Those are very large numbers. I do not want to multiply 8 times 18 and try to find target product, target sum with that. And I'm a math teacher and I like math and I still don't want to do that. Okay, you want to try to take those GCFs out. My screen went off again. It is telling me I have talked for way too long. My voice is telling me the same thing. Okay, last one. Here we go. So GCF here, I've got a 2 that goes into everything. I know that for sure. So that gives me 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. Okay, that's reducing each one of these inside by 2. When I look at that, I want to double check, make sure I took out the greatest. So make sure there's no common factor left. Okay, there isn't any. 4 does not go into 9, so we're good. Okay, so now we can move on. So now we're going to target product, target sum. 4 times 9 is 36, much better than 8 times 18. Okay, target sum is negative 12. So my two numbers here are going to be negative 6 and negative 6. Okay, they multiply to give me positive 36. Negative 6 minus 6 is equal to a negative 12. So that's my two numbers. 2, I'm going to go ahead and change this to a bracket. Brackets and parentheses are the same thing. You can choose to use brackets or parentheses anytime you wanted to. Technically, I can make all of these brackets. Okay? When you're talking about this, brackets and parentheses are the same. The only time brackets and parentheses differ is when you're talking about interval notation, which we've already done in this class and we will do again later. But when you're talking about these, it doesn't matter. So I can change it to brackets or parentheses. I keep it brackets just to make sure that 2 doesn't accidentally multiply itself back in. That happens sometimes. So that's why I use brackets. You don't have to. You can use parentheses there if you'd like. 4x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay. Put in my two middle numbers. That was my split the middle. Here we go. Factor by grouping. 2. Here I got a 2x. And I'm left with 2x minus 3. Be very careful here when I divide by 2x. Okay, 4 divided by 2 is 2x. 6 over 2 is 3. The x's cancel. So 2x minus 3. Do the same thing here. I take out a, notice this is negative positive. I want positive negative, so I'm going to take a negative 3 out front. So that when I divide by negative 3, I get positive 2x minus, okay, this is a negative 3. I know I kind of made it hard to see. Negative 3, 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. Those match. Drop the brackets, we get 2x minus 3. 2x minus 3. If you're wondering, you can write this 2x minus 3 squared, but you don't have to. You can leave it just like this. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with this answer right here. Okay, but you can use that last one as well. That's going to be the end of factoring trinomials, okay, which was 6.2 and 6.3.